Hi, loves. Welcome back to our Monday interview show, where I am so thrilled for our very special guest today, Kris Carr, who is someone I have long been a fan of her work, her books, her amazing energy. She is the multi week New York Times bestselling author of the Crazy Sexy book series. And also, she is the subject and director of the documentary Crazy Sexy Cancer. She's also a fellow Hay House author, and she has a new book out called I'm Not a Morning Person, braving loss, grief, and the big, messy emotions that happen when life falls apart. So, Kris, thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm so excited.
I'm so happy to be with you, Kimberly. This is a long time coming. We finally get our time together.
Finally get our time. Everything is, this universal timing. And I've been such a fan of your work for a long time. And we're both plant-based advocates. And I love your energy. I love your smile. I love your positivity. So here we are.
Right back at you, honey.
So it's also amazing that we are doing this show around Valentine's Day. I was reading in your amazing book. We have so many coincidences and things that are just so aligned. And one of the ones that isn't so happy is that on Valentine's Day, I know you got your cancer diagnosis, and that was actually the day that my mother got her cancer diagnosis. She passed in 6 weeks. I know the story, the central story in your book around your father, it took some years. But either way, whether it's anticipatory grief, as you talk about, or shocking grief, we're never prepared for these moments that are going to hit us all in different ways. And I love in the book how you expand on how grief is not just, this one specific thing, but it's a big emotion.
Yeah. And first and foremost, I'm so sorry for your loss. And it's so hard to lose a parent. I think many times perhaps we don't give it enough of a beat in our lives because in our society it's sort of like the natural order of things, and but it's a monumental shift that each and every one of us are going to experience at some point. And going back to Valentine's Day, the flip side of grief, which I've learned, is love. And the more we love, the more we grieve. But
Yes.
we don't have the tools, many of us, to actually go on this journey. And so I think what we do instead is, because we might be so terrified of these big emotions, because, for many of us, it feels like we're in the fight, flight, freeze mode. We are, because that's the physical manifestation of pain. And so we will do whatever we can think of to numb, to avoid, to stuff it down, maybe to work harder and hustle longer. And coming from our background, we know that health is a very holistic, integrated experience. And so it's not just about what we're eating, it's also about
Yes.
addressing what's eating us.
I love that. I was going to say one of the ways in which I really connect so deeply to your work is that you're also talking about food and juice and smoothies and things that I also love. But then you're also talking about big emotions and emotional well being and spirituality, right? In the self connection, because it isn't just going to be the one thing, right? And
Yeah.
we talk about these cornerstones, Kris: food, body, emotional
Mm.
well being, spiritual growth. If you're just eating green salad and having the green juice, but you're pushing all of it down, it doesn't make you a healthy person. That's not real wellness.
Yeah. Well, it creates more inflammation. And
Yes.
I feel like I came at this lifestyle from such a 21 years ago. So yesterday was Valentine's Day. If you're listening to this, it won't be Valentine's Day probably, but yesterday, before we recorded, was Valentine's Day. And it was my 21-year cancerversary. So
Wow.
21 years of living with stage 4 cancer. And when I was newly diagnosed, the first thing that I turned to was food because it was the thing I thought, well, I feel so out of control. And what can I
Yes.
control? Well, I can control what I put in my body. So let me start there. It helped me feel like I was doing something, that I was participating in my well-being or my attempt at well-being. And over time, the practice built and changed and
Yes.
grew to your point where it was like, wow, I can't just focus on the healthy food because I'm riddled with fear and anxiety and stress.
Yes.
So what do I do to help that? Now that I'm feeling better, I have more energy. This piece is still really troubling me.
So it's interesting when my mom had her diagnosis, the first thing I did as well was in that doing mode. Hey, I know how to care for you. We're going to cut out sugar. We're going to have green juice and all these things. Right. And then there's, this part of the book where you talk about this. It's just this surrender like I've never had to surrender before, right? I describe myself as a recovering perfectionist, controlling,
Yeah.
you know, over performer, always wanted to be number one in my class, always had to have perfect grades. And I had never faced something that was so overwhelming that you have to surrender whether you like it or not. It felt like this giant wave. And then there was
Mm.
this shift at a point, Kris, where, I was praying. I pray for my mom to get well. I pray for this healing. And then at a certain point, it shifted because it all happened so quickly. It
Yeah.
was, I pray for her soul to be in peace, right? There was this peace that passeth all understanding that, that's part of the journey unless we resist it, which some people seem to be in grief for intense grief for longer periods. Can you touch a little bit more on those topics, Kris? Because you talk about this all in depth in your book. Surrender,
Yeah.
control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. So each chapter in the book is designed around an emotion or experience you may face when the rug gets pulled out from under you. And it's going to happen to each and every one of us. I think one of the greatest things that we can pursue as human beings is to learn how to become more stress hardy.
Mm,
And I am one of those people. I'm like, I want the rainbow, but I don't always want the rain, right? And that's not how life works. And yet many of us are very sideswiped when the rain does come.
yes.
And it's as if we manifested something or we did something wrong to call it in. And again, this is cycles of life and nature. They're so much bigger than us. And so how do we learn to ride those waves? You use the metaphor of a wave, which is so common in grief circles and the grief community. And I think what's so powerful about that is that when we think about a wave, we think about nature. I just got to Florida. I'm hoping to go for a walk on the beach later and see the ocean, and if I were to stand there and try to hold back the ocean, right?
Yeah.
Let's just say that, Kimberly, I was strong enough to do that for a minute. Let's just say the waves are going to start to stack. And then over time, it's going to get to a point where I am definitely not strong enough to keep holding the waves back. And as powerful as I am, as we are, we're not more powerful than the ocean. And it's the same, I think, with our emotions. The way out, it may sound cliche, but the way out truly is through. And it's
Yes.
also a lot more peaceful. It's a lot more, it's better for our nervous systems. It supports our entire healing and well-being. And I think it helps us become more integrated as people because if we think about it, emotions are just information. They're energy. They're here
Yeah.
for a reason. And so us getting curious about them and learning how to care for them, I'm sure everybody listening to you is interested in self-care and well-being. This is the same exact thing. We're just applying those principles to our emotions, especially understanding that ruptures will happen. Ruptures are the moment where life changes, where the
Mm,
rug gets pulled out from under you, where you feel like you've been kicked in the choppers. They're going to happen. And it's about how we show up for ourselves and show up for those emotions, how well we come out on the other side.
These are such important teachings, Kris, and I feel like I think many of us I didn't learn this when I was
Yeah.
a child. I think a lot of us, it's almost like, "Ouch, I don't wanna feel that pain or that emotion, let me bury it or let me do something," right? Where the perfectionism came from. And it's interesting, I have 2 young children, and it's almost like I'm healing my childhood through teaching them about these feelings, and sometimes I feel like I'm talking to myself when I'm talking to
Oh.
them. So that's been part of this healing, but it's amazing how integral this is to our well-being. And yet, a lot of us don't have a clue how to actually deal with feelings. So, what would you say to someone, Kris, if they say, it just feels yucky? I don't like it. I want it to go away, right?
Mm.
Sort of in a basic sense, like, I don't like this.
Mhm.
I don't like
Hey,
this wave. What do you say to them?
hey, I don't like it either. And one of the things that my therapist said to me that I write about in the book is when the grief train pulls into the station, it brings all the cars,
Yes, I read that.
right? It brings past hurts, it brings things that you think that you're over, it brings up trauma, and all of that can inflame other emotions. Like I have a chapter in the book that's about anger and rage, and it's called Becoming Unbecoming, and how I wasn't prepared for the amount of rage that was coming up for me in the moments of explosion and implosion, which I write about
Mm,
very candidly, in a way where I was like, am I really going to tell people about that? Like, yeah, because I'm not alone. And I think our
yes.
stories connect us. But I love what you're talking about with your children and teaching emotional literacy, because as soon as we vilify something, whatever doesn't come out in a healthy way will still come out.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we know that it'll come out in another way that's oftentimes a lot more complicated. And so if we go back to this idea that you don't, another thing that my therapist says is like, it is what it is and you don't have to like it. Here's the emotion and you don't have to like it, but our opportunity is to get curious about it. And so I made this connection about a year ago about the different organs in my body that have cancer. So I have tumors in my liver and both of my lungs.
Mm.
And when I was newly diagnosed, I mean, none of us come to this planet with an owner's manual. I didn't know what my liver and my lungs did. I was like, I know they do good things and I need them.
They're important. They're
Yeah,
in there.
they're in there. They must be doing something. But then when I went on this wellness journey, I said, well, what if I get to know these organs? What if I learn
Mm,
what they do and what they prefer? I learned their preferences and how to take care of them like something that I love. And
mm.
it's the same idea, I think, with Kris, I don't like grief. Okay, I understand that. But it's like me saying, I don't like my liver. There's something about my liver that's not attractive. It's subpar.
Yes.
I need my liver, right? And so we need our grief to be
Yes.
whole people. We can't amputate any parts of ourselves and expect that wholeness that each and every one of us craves. And so I would say, that's okay, but I invite you to get curious about it. Why?
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Why? And then also, for me, it's I say this mantra to myself. It's only sensation. It's only
Hmm.
sensation. So I went on this it's
It's beautiful.
very difficult for me to go into cold water. My husband has a cold plunge, and we swim in the cold waterfalls in Hawaii, where we also live. And I say this mantra, it's only sensation, as a goal to myself to master sensation. Because I wasn't taught emotional well being. So when those big feelings hit, I'm like, oh, goes through. Wow. Just that curiosity that what you right here is about the acknowledging, first of all, that it's there. And then I love this quote. This is at the very beginning of the book in the introduction, where you say burying pain can also make us sick or at the very least constipated, right? Because digestion is something that I've talked
Yeah.
about so much, you've talked about. It's not digesting food, but it's also digesting and letting these big emotions, grief, anger, come through. not just pushing, but come through us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So if there's a lot of tools in the book, but you are touching on all of them innately because I think this is who you are. And obviously, you've gone through big life things and you're on this path yourself. And oftentimes we overlook the simplest things, the basics, because many of us are looking for the next big healing experience, or it must be out there, it must be something I don't know, or what's the latest
Yes,
this, that, and the
out
other
here.
thing. Yeah. The latest trend or hack or whatever it is. And with health, I always come back to the basics. In fact, I keep it as simple as possible.
Thank you. Me too.
Simple, right? Because I want to do this for the long term. I want to add years to my life. And I don't know about you, Kimberly, but when I get overwhelmed, when I lose my passion, when I get bored, like it is hard for me to gin up the inspiration
Yes.
to not only continue on my self-care path, but teach others.
Yes.
Right. And so when we go back to the simplest things when it comes to our emotions, that first step is awareness, as you said
Mm.
so beautifully. And so can we begin our process of emotional literacy by even merely calling out and naming what the emotion is that you're experiencing, as opposed to, I don't like how this feels. That's great. Awesome. Wonderful start. Let's go a little further. What is the feeling?
Mm.
And if you think about it with your children, I mean, they're going to immediately say, I'm sad, I'm angry, right? But as adults, we might have a hard time even identifying what the emotion is because we have been domesticated to push it away or to bury it or to make it less important, especially the emotions that my grandmother would call unbecoming. That's the name of the chapter. It is unbecoming to express
Ah,
anger, especially as a woman.
where is she from? Where did she grow up, Kris?
Colombia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she and it was a different time, right? So there
Yes.
was she would say, don't cry, it's not becoming, don't show
Right.
anger, it's not becoming. Well, where do those things go?
Right. Exactly.
I can tell you where they went. They went into drinking, they went into, a lot of other places that where I found to be outlets to discharge energy or sensations because I didn't know a healthier way to do it.
Right. Right. So then we acknowledge, here it is, and then feel, right? We have to actually go into it.
Yeah, allow ourselves to feel those feelings. And sometimes they don't feel safe. And so you might want to do them in a safe environment with somebody you trust, somebody you love, with your therapist. For me, it always starts in my journal. So
Yes.
identifying what it is and then just like brain dumping, however messy, whatever wants to come out. Nobody's going to read it. You can burn it. You can lock it away. You can, do whatever you need to do, but to just like process it on the page. And then from there, it'll usually go further. I'll have a conversation with somebody that I trust, like my therapist or, one of the healing practitioners that I work with, of like what's coming up for me in this
Yes.
time. But let's go even further, because I don't think we can always, and this is what the research says, we can't always solve the problems of the mind just with the mind. So just with talk therapy,
Thank you. Yes. I wholeheartedly believe that.
right? We have to get it out of our bodies. And that's where I think that discharge or movement can really come in. And finding a way for you to channel that energy so that you are getting it out. And it doesn't have to be complicated. So something that I talk about is, let's say I'm finding myself in an anxiety loop, and anxiety is a rumination about what may happen. So it's fear, but more so fear of what may or may not happen. And it's the stories we tell ourselves. And when we're telling ourselves stories, we're having an out of body experience. We're
Mhm.
totally someplace else. And so, how can we break that sort of like almost like a dog with a hot spot that they're licking because they're in pain, and it just becomes habitual. And you have to break the fever. And so we break that fever by changing the channel, by getting in our
Yes.
bodies. For you, I don't know what it would look like.
Oh,
For me, it would be going for a brisk walk, you know, and then coming back and being like, and suddenly I feel better.
yes. It's amazing you mentioned this, Kris, because before my mom passed away, I had a pretty serious vinyasa yoga practice, 5 days a week, hour and a half on
Mm.
the mat, lots of handstands. And, again, it's so unique for all of us. Some people say, oh, yeah, go out and stretch on your yoga mat when you are going through grief. When my mom passed, I gave up my asana practice. And it
Mm.
wasn't something I planned, just, now I do some yin stretching, but I gave up that practice and I needed to walk barefoot on the beach. Here in LA, it's possible, of course. So I would do an hour beach walk and I didn't have the language to explain it, except that I wanted to connect to the earth. I needed to feel grounded. To your point, I just felt like, ugh, like so much vata, so much wind energy. I didn't really know what else to do, but all I know is I got off the mat and I started walking with no shoes, and that was really what I needed, right? So it's so intuitive. We just have to
Yeah.
allow ourselves, because then the part of my brain is like, wait a minute, you have this serious practice, and you're teaching you, what are you going to do about that part of your life? But then my heart was like, no, didn't feel good at the time, and
I
I still
love
walk.
that you talk about that. Yeah, then that's where you are right now, and that's where you need to be. And I think to your point, that's where intuitive healing comes in. Of what do I need to do to move this energy to help tend to my heart so that
Yeah.
I can feel better. When we lose people that we love, and
Ugh,
this is not just about lose the death of a loved one. We go through losses throughout our life. The loss of a job, for me being diagnosed with cancer, the loss of my former sense of self and identity,
yes.
right? So we're always experiencing loss, and to be able to find ways to allow that loss to make us more stress hardy, to help us expand, to help us grow into who we are becoming because we are mortal, is such an incredible practice. The people, I think, the people that and pets who pass, my belief is that they're still with us, but in different form because
Oh, yes.
energy evolves, right? And we have this opportunity to connect in a different way now. And, but oftentimes, because we live in that very black and white binary world, it's like we want it over, as you said earlier. And there isn't an over, there is a forward.
Mm, mm.
And that's a big
Beautiful.
dose of like grown up medicine to take in because we don't always want to hear that. But I think it's more in line with how the universe works.
Exactly. Even though our ego doesn't like it, it wants to control, it wants it to be
Yeah.
this way. One thing, Kris, I can honestly say is, this bursting open of my heart, this incredible um love,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
The connection to other people just grew so much. And for you, Kris, having this, you've loving, heart-centered, having this diagnosis hanging over you. Some people could say, oh, it's so, overbearing, it's heavy. I had this
Right.
cancer diagnosis for 21 years. But yet you found this way to be present, right? And so can you share a little bit about when the mind comes in and says, oh, well, what if this happens? What if it, you know, goes out of control now? Or how do you live with that and stay light?
I have lots of tricks. I do
A lot
because
of things.
yeah, because I'm still human, right? And when I was newly diagnosed with this very strange, rare stage 4 cancer that I have, the first doctor that I met with suggested a triple organ transplant.
Oh,
And yeah, exactly. I was like, well, I don't know much about medicine, but that seems like a lot, you know? Uh,
Placing everything in there, my goodness.
hmm, maybe I should get another opinion. And I kept getting other opinions. And, some of them were, yeah, I got the expiration date, all the different things. And it was this moment where I realized I have to become my own best friend. I have to become my own advocate. I have to become the CEO of my well-being so that
Mm,
I can navigate this world. And I don't know anything about the world that I'm entering, but I know that I need a strong second in command, somebody who does know about this world, so that as I'm educating myself, I at least have, you know, that support in place. And when I found my doctor, after being very dogged about finding the right person for me, he was like, look, your disease is a black box. It can be aggressive. It can be slow growing. It can be slow growing. It becomes aggressive out of nowhere. We don't know. The best thing that we can do is watch and wait and track you. And while we're watching and waiting, you go off and live your life. And I was like, that seems crazy, but okay, I don't know how to do that. But literally, Kimberly, I left the hospital crying because you want it behind you. So I understand this deep human desire to have the pain behind us. I wanted the cancer behind me so that I could go
yeah.
on living, which it took me about 10 years to figure out that that was the wrong goal, actually,
Mm.
for me. And I'll explain that in a minute. But so I left the hospital and I went to Whole Foods with the shopping cart crying, like going through the produce aisle. And I don't know if I was crying about the cancer or crying about kale because it's something I'd never eaten or even seen, you
Really?
know?
What
Oh,
was
yeah.
your diet like before the diagnosis?
Fast food,
Really?
takeout, fake food, the faker, the
Meat?
better. Like, I, all of it. I love Burger King. Burger King was my go to place.
Wow.
Oh yeah, no, I remember when I was 9 years old, the first Burger King opened up near my home, and I rummaged through my mom's purses and like a dime here, a dime there, and I walked. Like it was probably
Oh
about
my god.
5 or 6 miles, and I saved a dime to call my grandmother to pick me up after I had my little French fry.
Oh my god. You were probably motivated to go there at 9 because of all the commercials and the ads and
Oh, yeah. I
everything.
mean, this is the 70s too. So it's not like, I don't know why somebody wasn't like, why is there a 9-year-old here
Oh my
by
god.
herself? But so I did not come into this lifestyle with like a head start. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But I found my way, and over time, I started to feel better. And I started to teach people about how they could participate in their well being.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until the 10-year mark. And that was my original kind of like expiration date timeline. Um, at the 10-year mark, everybody was thrilled that I was still stable and still doing well, and the cancer was still slow growing. But I wasn't, because I
Mm,
wanted to be cured. I wanted it to be over. And I figured I'm doing all these things. I am so healthy. I am, at this point, I even have do I have my third book is out? I don't remember, but other people are getting really healthy, right? And here it is. I am still riddled with cancer. And I felt like
mhm,
such a failure. And
mm,
I felt like there was no business for me talking to somebody like you. Inside, I had so much just disappointment and a sense of I'm not
mm,
doing it right or good enough. And I had this moment where I was like, you know what? I quit. Not quit taking care of myself, but I quit having this expectation that unless life looks perfect on paper in a certain way, that it's not worth living in this moment right now. I quit trying to be something that I wasn't.
mm.
I quit
Getting
trying
goosebumps.
all of it. And I just said, what if you live your whole life with this disease? What if it's stable for your whole life, but you wasted it all
Mm,
because you didn't think it was good enough unless you were cured? And
mm.
in that moment is when I realized that difference between healing and curing.
Yes,
And
which you also write about in the book. I love that section.
yeah, just the brief nutshell is this: curing takes place in the body, and it may or may not happen. And if it doesn't happen, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're not flawed. It may or may not happen. And if it does, wonderful, we'll celebrate you. And if it doesn't happen, we're here to support you as you support your overall well-being. None of us are perfect, right?
No.
But healing can take place no matter what. And
Mm,
healing takes place at the spiritual level, at the
mm,
soul level, at the conscious level, through emotional expansion. And you can be healing to the moment of your passing and beyond, right? And
mhm.
so that is where I set my compass now.
I love it. Oh, wow. I love it. It's
Yeah.
such a big distinction. One is surface, limited, linear, here's how it looks, and the other cannot be put in a box, right? It's just this expansive, experiential heart. I
That's
mean,
beautiful.
so much heart in it, right? Like this is it's just a sense, it's a softening, isn't it? It's like
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. It's so true. You know, you're so right, because I feel like the deeper I've gone on this journey, the more I equate strength with softness, which in the
yes.
past I didn't, and now I do. It's that softening of the heart, it's the softening of the spirit, it's just the softening that is the surrender.
You know what's interesting in your story, Kris, is you mentioned at the 10-year mark, right? And that's something I talk about a lot, these numbers. Oh, by 10 years, it should look like this. Or this is how much I should weigh. This is how many calories I'm supposed to eat. I'm supposed to be at this certain place, at this certain age, or I should have this many followers or this many
Yeah.
downloads. There's all these numbers that are so mind, ego,
Mhm.
squashing this incredible true self energy. And it's always, I always like just, it's hard in this society because numbers are put in front of our face a lot. But I find in my journey, the more I connect here, the numbers don't bother me so much. They don't, otherwise we give our self worth away to numbers all the time. And then, like you said, what is the point of this life? What's the point of wellness if we're not light, peaceful, moving towards more joy and more bliss? What is the point of having this perfect body or millions of people following you or whatever it is?
Yeah.
The
I
number.
love that you're talking about that. It's so important for every single one of us to think about, but also to keep touching back into, because what I've seen in my own journey is I have these moments where I wake up, like my diagnosis, I woke up.
Mm,
But I'm a human, so I'm going to go back to sleep.
yes.
I am going to go back to sleep. And sometimes what's old is new again. Like, oh my gosh, I'm learning this again. Wait a minute. I thought I had gotten through that, or like an emotion,
Yeah.
or I thought that I was at a different place now. And then you realize that we're all orbiting around these same themes. And every time, this is something that Carl Jung talks about, with each passing orbit, we find a new layer of meaning, a new
Mm,
layer of growth. And it's that orbiting that's the mechanism of our healing. So when we have those moments where we get hooked into, it should look like this, it should be like this, we should be hitting these numbers, whatever they are. Can we just have a moment there and say, what does flow look like?
mm,
Right? What does flow feel like? How can I tend to my heart in this moment? And when oftentimes, Kimberly, when I even say that to myself, when I say, what would flow look like, and how can I tend to my heart in this moment or with this topic? Most of the time, my heart says, I don't give a shit about that.
wow.
And you're like, okay, that's some good wisdom. So ego, so Kris, why do you give a shit about it?
Right.
What's it really about? Is it an old boo-boo from the past? What is really driving this behavior, this desire that's actually not allowing you to be in flow?
I love that. And I'm laughing because my heart told me something similar the other day and I wrote it down. It's like you don't have to, what it told me, Kris, exactly was mind wants to process, heart says dump it to the side.
Hmm.
Right? Instead of getting all like, oh, like all this processing. Sometimes we do, again, feel and go through, but sometimes some of the stuff that we think is so important or we should care or we should delve in. You say what versus why in here, right? All this, like, why did they
Mm.
say this? And like, just to the side. I dump
Yeah.
it and I say, "Actually, this is amazing, this moment, without all that stuff." Don't over personalize, because that was, some of from my past trauma, like, so much analyzing and, like, "Why is this happening?" or "Why did they say this? Did they mean that?" Da da da
Oh,
da, versus
yes.
just that, simple eating, right, is my mantra now,
Mm.
and simple, just simplifying my thoughts, whereas going into the heart, it just kinda lets um it just be more of a straighter path, you know what I mean?
I absolutely know what you mean, and it's simple and it's not easy, but the
Yeah,
more we do it, the more familiar we get with the process, and I think the goal of this conversation is to help people feel like they're not alone, they're not crazy, there's nothing wrong with them. That healing is a big world and it also includes our boo-boos
yeah,
and our wounds and the parts of ourselves that need that tender loving care. Just like something that might be more obvious needs the tender loving care. Something that's deeply buried inside of you may not be, and yet your behavior and your patterns, if you really look at them, are saying, actually, this is where you're called to put your focus now. It might be
mm,
less, maybe you've gotten to a point where, the diet and lifestyle piece has become easier because you've done it for a while and you understand it and you have your own practice and you've got your flow enough there. At least you have a home base to come back to, whenever you need to sort of have a reset. But then you have this opportunity to say, okay, where else am I needing some loving assistance? And and that's the place that I'm at in my life right now, which is
mm,
going back to what I said earlier, like the first portion of my healing journey in my career was really helping myself first and foremost focus on what I was eating, my 5 pillars of wellness, what we're eating, what we're drinking, what we're thinking, and how we're resting and renewing, and really
mm.
putting that practice together. And now this part of my journey and my career, because they tend to go hand in hand.
Yes.
I'm grateful other people are interested in some of these topics too, because really I write for myself. Um, but this phase that I'm in right now is really okay. Well, we've done the what we're eating, and now we really have to focus on what's eating us, what's eating you, Kris. You
I
know,
love that. So, can you share a little bit, and I wanna get in a moment to some of the practical parts of the book as well, because again, it's grounded, it's meeting everybody where they are. You talk about, amazing, really helpful, but practical things too, like hydration, right? But where Chris is today in her spiritual journey, in her emotional journey, in her physical health journey, can you share a little bit about what you do in the morning? What are some of your, it sounds so cliche. People ask me this all the time. What's your morning routine?
yeah.
But I'm really interested as someone who's developed hundreds of recipes, as I have too. The funny thing is, how I eat, Chris, is so simple, right? So I just love to know, like, what are some of the things you do? Do you meditate in the morning? Do you have a gratitude practice? Do you journal in the morning? Do you journal at night? Is it free form? Is it guided? Tell us a little snippet, the inner world of Chris.
Yeah. So I first of all, I love people's morning routines because we're always wanting to know what everybody else does. And we always will. We'll always be curious because we see people thrive and success leaves clues, And so it's like, oh,
True.
what do you do? What can I add to my toolkit? Um, it's very simple. Like if you and I were to cook together, we'd probably be happy as can be because they're like I would probably cook you something impressive because it'd be the first time you were coming over. But then as we became friends, we'd probably be like, hey, you want like a quinoa bowl with
Oh, that's all you
avocado?
consider. I'm like tahini, lemon juice, water, and sea salt. There's my dressing.
There you go. Avocado. What vegetables do we have? Like,
Yes.
I don't spend a lot of time in the kitchen, and I used to, and certainly when you are writing cookbooks and whatnot, you do spend a lot of time in the kitchen. And but I needed to work with my lifestyle, and so it'll be a lot of batch cooking and things like that, just to make it easier. But my morning routine is very simple, Kimberly. It's literally there's one thing I do every day without fail, and Actually, there's 2 things that I do every day without fail, and then the rest is sort of fluid. The first thing is every day that I wake up, I put my hands on my heart and I say, "Thank
Mm,
you, body, for another day. Thank you."
I love that.
You know, just thank you.
The
Look at
first
this.
thing first
Yes, just
thing,
as soon as
starting
my eyes open, thank you, body, for another day.
mm,
Thank you. I know it's not easy going
oh,
through this world, and you're doing such a great job. Thank you, body. It's just like just
I love
treating
it.
yourself like the little kid that you still are.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell this to you, and obviously I'm not just telling this to you, so I have to remember that because I feel like we're just having a private
I
conversation.
know.
But as somebody who's also had a lot of issues with, gut health, I've never told
Yes.
this to anybody. Um, I also, like, after I have a bowel movement, I thank my body. I'm literally like,
Oh,
"Good job, body. I am
oh my
so
gosh.
proud of you."
I do the same thing. I say, "Thank you, colon," and I also talk to my colon before. I say, "It's okay. You
Yeah,
could
it's
let go."
okay.
I
Yeah, you
say,
can do this. And
"Which
if you don't want to, that's fine too.
Right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you did such a good job. I'm
I
so
love
proud
it."
of you.
There's amazing intelligence in those organs. There's more research. That's a whole other tangent about this, consciousness, right, in the cells. So I really
Yes.
100% believe in exactly what you're saying, connecting here, the
Yeah.
heart, the colon, the liver. These are
All of
living
it.
entities.
100%. And I, as somebody who was very hard on my body, and would get very frustrated when things weren't working and very down on myself and very dismissive of myself. It's like such a healing change to have those kinds of loving conversations as opposed to, of course not. Of course, this happened because you're
Yeah.
this, that, and the other thing. And it's probably the biggest practice that's the ongoing practice that I have, which is that practice of self love. So,
Mm.
starting with thank you, body, for another day. Thank you, colon. You're so amazing. I always have a smoothie. So, that's number two,
Yay.
without fail.
Love it.
If the meditation doesn't happen, my meditation is having the smoothie. Um, and everything else rotates. Some days I'll journal in the morning. Some days I want to write copy, and I'm the freshest in the morning, so I'll have my smoothie and then get to business. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I feel like as our practices grow, mindfulness is something that's woven throughout the day, as opposed to this is my mindfulness time.
Mhm, mhm.
You
Oh,
know?
yes. Exactly. It's what, Yogananda calls practicing the presence, right? It's not just
Mm,
this is what meditation looks like when our eyes are closed, but it carries out
mm,
into this presence. Like, there's nowhere else but right here, right now. I'm just giving my full attention to this person. I'm giving my love to this person, right? Speaking of which, and because it was just Valentine's Day, I also would love to know a little bit about your relationship with hubby. I share about
yes.
my hubby who's my mirror, Kris, and when we met,
Mm.
everybody's like, "Oh, you're opposites," just in terms of our interests and how we look, and he's not plant-based, but we connect in this way, and he'll call me out on stuff, and he doesn't actually meditate so much, but he supports my spiritual practices, and it was just a very amazing relationship, even though it doesn't look like it would be on the surface, right? The heart connects. So can you share a little bit about hubby? Do you guys practice together? Do you cook together? Do you work together?
Yeah.
How's it flow?
That's a great question. So we've been together 20 years now, and we started dating when I was newly diagnosed. He was a friend from, a former life, and he was a film editor at the time. And I was making my film Crazy Sexy Cancer, and he volunteered to edit a little trailer for me, and I submitted that trailer to an industry night, and it got chosen, and then it got distribution, and then it got sold to
Mm,
Discovery and then to the Oprah Winfrey Network. And we started by working together in a very creative capacity. And
mm,
4 years into making the film, it aired 4 years after I picked up the camera.
wow.
Um, we got married. So we were getting married. Like, it's all in the film. It's in the footage. It was definitely not what I was thinking was going to happen. I, I wasn't dating. I didn't think that, quite honestly, I didn't think that anybody would want to date me. I felt like that love part of my life was over, because who's going to want to date this woman with incurable stage 4 cancer that's
Oh,
riding this roller coaster of, I don't know. And I couldn't be further from the truth, but it fed into all of that brokenness that I was feeling. And we are both very creative people. We do work together, and we've worked together for 20 years now. So he helps me run the business, and he does all the film and video editing, and he's our COO. And um,
wow.
we figured it out, because working together isn't always where love goes to thrive.
For some
But
couples, though, right? It's the
yeah,
perfect mix.
for us, it's about the creative process. So as long as we are both thriving in our creative process, and our creative, light can come together, that's wonderful. Like, that really feeds the relationship. We have different, diets and lifestyles, and he definitely loves meditating. I think he likes the idea of meditating more than meditating.
My
But
hubby too.
yeah, yeah. He's a student of Buddhism, and so
Mm,
he is very open to so many of the spiritual practices and whatnot. But when it comes to how we both live our lives, I think our shared commitment is to love, to compassion, to creativity, to laughter. We love having a good time, and we both have really good senses of humor. But I don't get up in his grill about what you have to do, or you don't have to
yes,
do. It's like, the only time you can change somebody is when they're in diapers. It's none of my business.
yes,
And it's what has worked. Like, because in the beginning, when I was newly plant-based and filled with all the passion, and
yes.
my eyes were open, and watching all the videos and being like, I didn't even understand that this is how the industrial agriculture
Oh,
is, and factory farm food system and whatnot. And so I had this phase where I was very much on my soapbox. Um, and that did not work. It didn't work for my family. It didn't work for my relationship. And then it was more so about being in the flow, and
yeah.
sharing the goodness, but also not having judgment for other people's choices.
Chris, I had dated mostly vegan people, yogis, people I met in my yoga studio in the past. And then I met John, and right away he's like, oh, I'll try being vegan. And he did it for a few months. It was really sweet when we were starting to date, and it just didn't work for him. So it's like that whole going below the surface, the love was so huge and uncontrollable that it was like,
Mm,
oh, this is teaching me true acceptance. Because like you, I wanted to share, and this is better for the environment, and this and all this, alkalize your body and all this stuff. And I was like, this works for him. I love him. And, this is how it's gonna be. So that respect, that real, my opinion isn't actually, more valuable than yours. Everybody's equal. We all have our own ideas.
yeah. And I think, I bet I know you would agree to this. It's like, as we grow as humans, I feel like, how can we become more mindful, more conscious, more connected than we were yesterday?
Mhm.
And if we all make that commitment, and that we sign up for that and say, yes, I'm on board for that journey, we know that it's this slow and steady wins the race. But if we think about it, how far we will get, as opposed to, it's my way or the highway, it's black or white, it's all or nothing. Because I think, in that all or nothing approach, whether it's with your diet, whether it's your emotional well-being, in your relationships, I think that's when they often fall apart, because all or
Yes.
nothing isn't sustainable. So what is your version of a sustainable wellness practice? And that's one that you are consistent with more often than not, that
Yes.
literally, on more days of the week than not, you're moving in that direction.
And like we said, soft, a more soft
Soft.
approach or
Yeah.
gentle, right? I never thought about how powerful gentle is. And then I saw it listed as one of the soul qualities in the Bhagavad Gita. This, forget the Sanskrit word, but this quality, that's the heart, right? The mind is rigid. I didn't do
Yeah.
enough. I didn't run enough today or work out or whatever it is. But this softness, right? It's like this, the
Yeah.
water shapes around the boat, the water moves the mountains, the water changes the direct, the
Yeah.
rivers change direction. So
Mm.
one of my favorite texts is the Tao, right? Where water's mentioned, I think 18 times in 81 of the verses. And it's just this power of gentleness, but this strength. So that's been, a big goal of mine is to bring that more watery quality to myself first, and then in all the rivers of my life, my
Oh,
relationships,
I love
work.
that. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, and all water, right? Hydration is
Yeah.
so important as someone that's literally battled constipation for so many years. It's just this, it's energetic, it's physical. All the things we're talking about, it runs through all these different parts of us. So, Kris, I absolutely love your book. I could talk to you forever. What I love about it as well is the tone. There's parts
Mhm.
that are, there's stories, there's, your natural, beautiful humor, there's research. It's also very practical. There's amazing tools. Is there anything that we didn't cover in your amazing book, I'm Not a Morning Person, that you want to share with us?
I love leaving people with this last nugget. So, one of the through lines throughout the book is when my dad was diagnosed and the healing journey that we went on and the loving journey that we went on through his passing and beyond, and how that's changed me in such a big way. Um, and even if you haven't lost somebody, these are still the, I think, the experiences of the heart that we all go through as we have moments where the rug gets pulled out from under us. And anyway, he, as his time was drawing closer to an end in physical form, he was dropping a lot more of his fatherly wisdom and fatherly advice. And so much of it was so rich. And I talk a lot about it in the book. But one of the things that he said was, make your golden years now.
Mm,
Make your golden years now, because many of us, we put it
mm.
off. We say, well, once this is over, once the kids are out of the house, once the renovation's done, once the book is delivered, once, whatever the issue is, the cancer is
Preacher.
behind us, right?
Yes.
Then
Yes.
I'll fill in the blank. Then I'll go on that trip. Then I'll have more time with my girlfriends. Then I'll have that heart to heart with the person who we
Mm,
really have to heal this rift, but not right now. It's too hard to do that now. Then I'll live,
mm,
right? And my dad had just sold his business and was getting ready to retire to go off and play golf with his brother and to do all these things. And now he's dealing with a terminal illness and his time was cut so short. But in those 4 years, I watched him create so many golden moments. So it's not necessarily the length of time, it's the quality of time. And each and every one of us today, we left with one thing. Hopefully it is to say, I'm okay and everything I'm feeling is natural, right? I'm just going to learn how to tend to myself more, but also to say, yeah, what what could a golden moment look like for me today?
mm,
Because we want to string them together, and that's what makes our golden years. That
mm,
not the perfect house or the perfect whatever it is, but it's like, what are some golden moments that I can either create for myself or to allow today?
mm,
And again, it adds up to this beautiful life.
mm. I love that. I love when you said stringing it together. I could almost see like a golden necklace or, the gold
Yeah.
thread that runs through those fabrics in India. And to your point, it can be
Mm.
simple, like this amazing moment in the sun or just this moment of
Yes.
quiet. It doesn't have to look like, oh, these, fake Instagram, like everything's perfect moments, right? Just right here, feels good, feels nourishing, and
Yeah.
however it looks to us.
Well said.
So powerful. I don't think we could end on a better note than that. Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful heart, your amazing wisdom with us, Kris. And share with us now where else we can learn about you, where we can get the book. Amazing. Where is
Yeah,
everybody?
thank you. So I'm at kriscarr.com, and on Instagram, I'm at Crazy Sexy Kris, Kris with a K. And the book is everywhere. So I hope anybody who needs it enjoys it. And thank you, Kimberly. I've been wanting to spend this time with you, and I appreciate you making time for me.
Oh, this is a long time coming. I'm so happy. I'm such a fan of your work. So thank you so much, Kris. I'm getting goosebumps once again. Feels like, I've known about you for like a decade. So this is incredible. And everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. We will have the show notes on mysaluna.com, our hub. We will link to Kris's book as well as some of the other ones of hers that I love, her website, more about her. And also over there, you can listen to other podcasts I think you would enjoy, recipes, guided meditations, and more. We will be back here Thursday, as always, for our next Q&A show. So thank you so much for tuning in and sending you much love.